The long-standing core of business operations is the vaunted ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning. For decades, companies like SAP have dominated this space. But ERP has always been hard to change. Until now. A new company is climbing the mountain, one module at a time. Learn how today's innovators are solving technical debt on this episode of Future Proof.
The future is here already. It's just not evenly distributed. Yet. Today's world teems with innovation. The nexus of hardware, software, and human ingenuity promises a revolution in possibilities. What does tomorrow look like? Witness Future Proof.
Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh, here in year 19, folks. We turned 18 years old in February of this year. It's kind of hard to believe. Time flies when you're having fun. But one of the guys I met along the way years ago was Sam Yen, back when he was over at SAP as the Chief Design Officer. And I remember design thinking. And it's funny, Sam, sometimes, let's just kind of dive right in. Sometimes you have ideas about how you want things to be, but it takes a while for the technology to get there. And I think we're at one of those interesting points of intersection right now where a lot of the ideas that we had about how we can do things different ways are suddenly incredibly possible. And a big part of that is generative AI. A big part of that are these models that have been built by, of course, Google and Anthropic. There are lots of models. X has Grok. There are all these different models. They're different in certain ways, and they kind of focus on different use cases, I suppose, as a way to put it. But we are at this amazing period of time right now, folks, and this is why the show is called Technical Debt. The hand you hold, implying is the hand that holds you down. Technical debt keeps CIOs and CDOs and operators up at night all the time. It's a very difficult thing to manage, and it's also very, very expensive. So it holds back agility, which is very, very dangerous these days. You must be agile if you're going to survive in this world where everything is changing. Behaviors are changing. I'm a marketer myself. I can tell you behaviors of audience members for webinars are changing dramatically. And it's largely because ChatGPT or Claude or these other engines give you whole answers in prosaic form, which is a very different model from Google. With the Google model, and let's face it, Google built a multi-trillion-dollar empire on keywords. That's it. It's all keywords. It's AdWords on one side, keywords on the other. The ads align with the keywords. You search for something and you get all these sponsored ads. These days you got to scroll down to get to the organic ads. And even the organic ads aren't really completely organic, folks. I'm kind of surprised at how many people don't realize that Google and YouTube and some of these other channels are pay to play largely. But we're seeing significant changes in behavior. But the topic for today, of course, is this capacity to create new applications very, very quickly using the fusion of generative AI and deterministic systems. So with that, Sam Yen, welcome to DM Radio. Welcome to Everest Systems. I joked in an email to you the other day that the demo I saw of Everest, whatever, 8, 9 months ago, was the best demo I'd ever seen, because it collapsed what was a months-long life cycle into like an hour, which is crazy. So tell us a bit about yourself, first of all, what brought you to Everest and what you see happening in the future here.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. I've been in the enterprise software space pretty much my entire career. So I started my career by actually creating an enterprise software company. I was a co-founder of an enterprise software company. I had the real privilege of joining SAP for many years, and actually working very closely and directly with the founder of SAP, Hasso Plattner. I had a background in design and engineering. He back in 2005 got very interested in the topic of design thinking you mentioned. In fact, I don't know if you know this, he actually helped provide some of the money to create the Stanford Design School. It's
Wow.
actually named after him. So when I saw that there was an opportunity right after he provided a lot of money to start the design school there, he was looking to create a new design team within the office of the CEO, working directly with the founder. So I raised my hand and got to work with him very closely on a lot of strategic initiatives to drive design thinking and also user experience to SAP. SAP didn't have the greatest reputation from a user experience perspective, but
That's
over
right.
time, yeah, we had the ability to. I was a chief design officer at one point, so to completely renovate the user experience. But as you know, in enterprise software, it takes a while for things to actually reach the end user. So I think with customers now kind of migrating to SAP's latest version, they see the user experience. But at the topic, and then I was at 8 years at JP Morgan, learning a completely kind of different industry. But one of the reasons I wanted to kind of get back into tech was this AI wave is huge, right? I grew up in the Bay Area, and kind of revealing my age a little bit. Like you could argue that like I saw even the PC revolution and
Wow.
the internet, the cloud, mobile, and AI. And I think a lot of people are arguing that this AI wave is bigger than everything else. So JP Morgan was great. I was the chief innovation officer for one of the lines of business. However, you're not as hands-on and on the front line of some of the latest and greatest technologies. So with something like this, I really wanted to be part of helping to define what AI could do, especially in the enterprise. So when I found out my former colleague who had started Everest Systems was building not only an ERP system but an AI platform to help generate production-ready, enterprise-ready kind of applications, I was definitely interested, and that's what led me here.
Yeah, and it really the sea change here is hard to quantify in any meaningful way. I mean, we've thrown some numbers out already, but I think the mindset change is going to be harder, but it's coming. I mean, it's the waves are crashing in. This AI is almost like a tsunami. It's just rising, the water's rising, and you have to figure out what's changing and how you can leverage it and how you can build new boats basically to ride on all this stuff. But the speed of development, and so in our presentation form, and folks, if you're listening to this, hop onto YouTube and go to our channel for DM Radio and Inside Analysis, and you'll find the presentation that Sam just did. But what he showed in a period of 15 minutes was a life cycle that historically has taken months and sometimes years to achieve. And we're not just talking about waterfall, for example. I mean, Agile as a development framework is like 25 years old now. It's not new. Agile's been around a long, long time. But now you're seeing CI/CD, right? Continuous integration, continuous delivery. That's a very different dynamic. And what this kind of technology brings is an even more dynamic solution for building business applications. And really, it's kind of amazing, but I think you're going to see a lot of uptake on this because the world is changing so quickly. One of my best friends in the business, a guy, Mark Madsen from Third Nature, he's been an analyst for years and years in this space. He refers to the phenomenon of everything's broken. The old ways of doing things are just not working the way they used to. So what does that mean? It means everybody has to change what they're doing. You have to find new ways to get the old things done. Well, in the business world, that is a command performance. I mean, that is a clarion call to do things differently. And I see this as really the tip of the spear for how large organizations can achieve the kinds of agility that currently really only small companies can have. That's a big deal, right, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that a little bit, right? I think your listeners are very familiar with AI in their daily lives, and I would say if you think about the maturity and awareness across organizations, throughout the country, nation, worldwide even, it's not going to be evenly distributed, right? That's that quote from before.
Yeah.
Um, so I think the folks that are the companies and especially the smaller companies that are very, very tech forward kind of are kind of keeping up with everything and kind of understanding how to best leverage what's going on. I think for the vast majority of folks, people are still using AI just in terms of answering questions, right? It's a more natural language form of the Google search bar, right? So like in terms of AI maturity, I think you go from there to then, okay, now AI could actually do stuff for you, right? So this notion of vibe coding and Claude at work and those types of things, people are starting to see it's not just answering questions for you, but it's starting to do things for you as well. And that's amazing. That's a big aha moment that I think a lot of people have seen, especially over the last 6 months. I think that the last 6 months,
Hmm.
that's really exploded. But I think there's still a big gap in terms of, okay, now how do you take all this capability and scale it in a larger organization, right? I think, again, I think smaller organizations where there's less processes, governance, regulatory kind of issues, it might be easier to just take these technologies right off the shelf and start using it.
Right.
Larger organizations are starting to try to figure out, okay, how do I do this? And I see the potential, I see the power of this, but I need to do this in a somewhat structured way. So it's scaled within we're not even talking about costs and token costs. We're just talking about
Right.
processes and those types of things. So like where we feel kind of there's maybe a gap where the industry is going to have to focus on right now is this notion of, if you look at software, it's not just in code generation,
Hmm.
but you have to think about it in terms of the entire software development lifecycle. Everything from the process of understanding from your stakeholders, internal or external, what the requirements are, gathering kind of insights, creating all the documentation you need to be able to start to spec out and make sure everybody kind of is on the same page to be able to build out a piece of software, to the code generation, of course. But then what happens afterwards? How do you test? How do you deploy? How do you support? How do you maintain that entire life cycle, right? Because like if you think of it from the perspective of the IT organization, or your CIO, the cost isn't just how quickly can you generate software. The real cost of software is actually the total lifecycle cost, the total cost of ownership of software. Most of it is actually in the maintenance side, right? It's after
Hmm.
the software is deployed, what happens a year from now, 2 years from now, or five years from now, when you need to update it, integrate it, fix things that have been broken. So that's kind of the scope that we've.
I'll throw this kind of question over to you as well. And I think you guys are addressing it better than most. For years, and I mean for years now, developers have been the bottleneck. So business has all these ideas, they want to do things, and it's like, okay, well, we'll get our team on it. Some idea wins, and then the director of the developers sits down and says, okay, guys, here's what we're going to build. And you plan something out and you start doing your sprints, and all this stuff happens. And that was a very common understanding. That's the bottleneck. So now we'll wait 2 months, 3 months for them to come out with a prototype. And okay, and think about it. The reason you come up with a concept called MVP, because a lot of times you get it wrong. So you don't want to get it wrong. You want to get it right. You don't want to waste a bunch of time building something that's not going to be correct. So that's why you do the MVP in the first place. Well, now the developers, that's no longer the bottleneck. The bottleneck is on the business to come up with ideas and then figure out how they can incorporate that into the business. That's a 180-degree turnaround. What do you think about that?
There's a couple things I want to say about that, but I remember I'm going to go back to in my design and innovation days. Like I used to define innovation as a combination of creativity and execution, right? And if you think about execution, it was all about like how quickly can you solve problems and actually do the work. But like innovation, but just doing that wasn't enough. You also had to kind of have the creativity side. And if the execution was about solving the problem, the creativity was about finding the right problem to solve, right? And so if
Hmm.
you find the right problem to solve, and then right, so that's analogous to what you were just talking about, right? AI has made it much faster now to be able to do the execution piece, right? Solving the
Hmm.
problem, but it puts a lot more pressure where it should be on the business to define what problem should I solve now. And I
Hmm.
think, these tools right now, even though they're mostly adopted by the technology part of the organization, I think, with some of the things that we're trying to do and other people are trying to do, it's going to be easier and easier for people with subject matter expertise, business expertise, to be able to be hands-on with the tools themselves. Maybe not to generate the full production ready code. I don't think we're ready for that yet. But certainly to do what you're saying, to say, hey, this is the problem, that I'm trying to solve. Here's a better way that I could articulate it so that you could use it directly within your organization, within your development organization. And in fact, maybe I could use these set of tools to also create a prototype. So it's not only kind of meeting my business needs, but this is how I know my users would like to kind of use the software as well. So I think we're getting to the point where it's actually creating kind of it's creating the bridge so that it's bringing the tech part of the organization, the business part of the organization much closer together.
Hmm.
And it's leveraging technology to do that.
ERP, for those who don't know, stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. This is the foundational technology that runs big business. There are lots of modules that spin out of that, supply chain management, for example, procurement. These are all very important systems. And of course, Sam was at SAP for years, which was and remains the what do they call it? The 800-pound gorilla in the space of ERP. Big business runs on this stuff, but historically, it has been very static. It's supposed to be robust. It's supposed to be durable. The last thing you want is for that thing to start acting up and causing trouble, because then your business is in trouble. So it's always been sort of hands off, like it's running, leave it alone. Operations people, don't touch that. Don't break my system because it's working. But now you can infuse the power of generative AI with the right matrix, the right framework, and build out new applications very, very quickly, which leads to other challenges like change management. You know, Sam, there are a lot of people, myself included, who are very concerned about the impact of AI on our jobs, on our workflow. What are we going to be doing all day? I've had a lot of really good guests talk about ways to deal with that and kind of to view it and understand it. But the change management is a big, big part of that. And I think you've got a story about, what is it, the IKEA effect or something like that?
Yeah, I was just to continue on the story that we were talking about before, right? It's so important. Like it's rarely technology innovations. Like it's usually when you try to deploy it in an organization, it's always the human element that is that limits the rate of adoption, right? At the end of the day. So it's really important to get stakeholder adoption from the very beginning. It's important to demonstrate quick wins. And it's important to build on top of that momentum, and that's how most change happens.
Hmm.
Getting that stakeholder alignment like is so important at the very beginning, and getting that stakeholder buy-in is really important. So there's a professor I work with at Stanford. His name is Baba Shiv, and he tells this thing called the IKEA effect. It's a study, and I might butcher the details of it, but the gist of it is basically the experiment is like, you're a subject, you enter a room, there's a desk that's put together, you're given a sledgehammer, you're instructed to destroy the desk, right? And they time you. And then kind of the second situation is, first you have to build the desk, and then you're asked to destroy the desk, and then they time you. And and it's called the IKEA effect because the desk is IKEA. In one case, it was built for you. The other case, you built it yourself. And the IKEA effect is, if you built it yourself, it takes you much longer to actually muster up the energy to destroy what you just created, right?
Wow,
Right.
that's cool.
And so now imagine that kind of in an organizational context setting, right? So if you're able to get your stakeholders to, if you're building an idea for them or a pitch for them, they don't have ownership of that. But if you go through a session where they feel that they're actually helping you build that idea, then they're much less likely to tear it down, right? So that's the
Yeah.
IKEA effect. But that's just an example. We were talking about a tool like this. Like if you're able to get your stakeholders and they're actively involved and they're building out what their investments are going to be, you're more likely to be able to get their support throughout the entire life cycle of the project.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I actually have had a similar idea over the years, which is that, if you build something, you don't want to destroy it because it's special to you because you
That's
helped
right.
build it.
Yeah,
So what's cool about this new wave of technology is that you can really bring the stakeholders in and they can offer their perspective in the moment. It's all captured, it's baked into the requirements and the specifications. So you're really folding this into the fabric of the solution itself, which gets everybody to take it personally, right?
that's right. You got it. Yeah, so they have personal ownership, and then there's of course there's less surprises, right? Because you've already kind of done so much of that upfront work, so that you see kind of what the specifications, see what the prototypes are, and then what's left when you actually kind of do the code, deploy the code. It's going to be it's going to be much less surprise because it's going to be very similar to what they created in the first place.
Yeah, that's wild. And it's like, because this is the important part, right? You mentioned actually the last mile, and the last mile always winds up being very, very expensive, right? You got an idea, you're like 80% there, 90% there, but man, getting the last 10%, is that's where you run into all sorts of issues and technical difficulties, and let's face it, challenges you didn't expect, things you didn't know about, for example. But getting that last mile is really, really important, and it's something that AI can help with in lots of different ways, I think, these days.
Yeah,
But I
I think we
love
spoke.
that go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think we spoke about that in the demo sessions. So just to kind of reiterate that, like if you look at economics, we already talked about the fact that most of your total cost of ownership is going to be, not in the application coding or the generation, but other parts of the entire life cycle. There's a similar kind of 80/20 rule when it comes to this notion of the last mile. When you buy packaged software, enterprise software, by definition, it's always going to be best practices. It's not going to be specifically tuned to your exact business processes or your region of the world. And there's usually some degree of customization that you need to do from a last mile perspective. But from again from a pure economics perspective, that last mile is super expensive. I say it's up to 10x the cost of what gets you 80% of the way there. So again, this is the opportunity for a tool like ours to be able to help you customize that last mile, but not only customize the last mile, but do it in a structured framework that that you can continue to maintain, upgrade, and do those things with it at a much cheaper cost than before. Where we were doing custom code or outsourcing that, or you had a bunch of SaaS solutions that you used
Wow.
to try to plug the gaps in.
Well, that's another really interesting point you just threw out there, which is that, let's face it, when organizations are trying to get things done, especially large organizations, there's only so much budget. So we've had a lot of offshoring the last 15 years or so. That's nothing uncommon about that. But when you're offshoring, well, let's face it, you don't really see what's happening. You're not in the environment as the solution's being built. And so there's this opacity that kind of hides the how and what it's actually doing. And that complicates maintenance over time. And that causes, consternation, it causes trouble. Now you can really work with your team to address all these issues and everyone can see what's being done. And the other really cool thing about the approach that Everest has taken is this sort of sandbox first mentality. If you think about what an MVP is, a minimum viable product, well, the Skunkworks team goes and they figure something out and they get it to be just good enough and say, okay, this is what we think you were talking about. Is that right? And sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no. But by taking this sort of sandbox first approach, having built the guardrails, if you will, of deterministic enterprise systems around all of that, you're really enabling the free play and the creativity of the business and the developers to collaborate to create new things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A sandbox is just some of the failure modes of just traditional software development, AI or not AI, is you build something in a vacuum, and either like you completely miss the mark, which we talked about before, or because there's no actual real data in this, like it doesn't work when the real live kind of data and information
Right.
comes in,
Right.
and you have no way of testing that, right? So the notion of the sandbox is, hey, you got a running system. We're going to create a snapshot of that in a completely safe environment. You could do a bunch of things. It's not gonna mess up your core system. You could experiment. You could do what if scenarios. You could change things around. Make sure it works. With your data at your scale, and then allow you to kind of merge that back into the system. So, at the end of the day, it's just more realistic ways of and safe ways of doing testing to extend or configure, and it allows for rapid iteration, right? The more times you could test out things and figure out what works and what doesn't work, the more you're compressing your time to be able to get to something successful.
Right. Well, and that's, fail fast forward is a concept that we've had in our world for a while now, but it's difficult to do if it's not already connected. That's the other very interesting part of this approach is that, again, it's grounded in your enterprise systems, your enterprise data, all the guardrails are already there. The sandbox is built inside of that environment. So you
Yeah.
can pull from all these systems. You mentioned it again in the presentation, folks, and if you were not in this live event, you can go on to YouTube and look this up with Sam Yen and yours truly. watch the presentation, because that's one of the really sticky parts of the process. Because and think about with notebooks, right? With data science, and you do something on your notebook, and oh, this is going to be great. Then try to put that in production. Good luck. I mean, it takes a long time to do that. And what you've done is solve for that very problem, which I think is really, really very clever. And that's probably what excited you the most about joining with Everest, right?
Yeah, that's just like one dimension of that is really interesting. Like think of how, especially like large organizations, how much money do large organizations spend maintaining all these different infrastructures, right? You got your
Right.
development infrastructure, you've got your user testing infrastructure, and your pre-production infrastructure, your scaling infrastructure, your production infrastructure. And then like how frustrating is it because it's so expensive and so hard to maintain these different infrastructures where something works in one environment, but when you move it to the next environment, then the next environment things break. So again, the sandboxing notion really is an elegant way of making sure that you are as close to the real environment as you want to be at any point in the development lifecycle.
Well, that's true too. And the data side of it as well is crucial, right? Because using synthetic data, I've heard some very interesting stories, war stories about using synthetic data, especially with AI systems. It seems to latch onto it and has a hard time letting go of the synthetic data when you want it to. It's like, okay, now forget all that synthetic stuff I just gave you. Here's the real thing. Please use this. So that's also a challenge, right? And with your environment, with this design point, you're automatically connecting it to or enabling connection to your enterprise data, which is
Absolutely.
always going to be different from synthetic data, right?
Yeah, it's a snapshot of whatever system that you want, and again, you're taking that. That's why we're calling it a sandbox. It's a safe environment for you to do whatever you want to it. You could get rid of it, or if you like the changes, you can merge it back.
Right. And historically, the sandboxes, I'm a data guy. We're in the data world here, data warehousing, business intelligence, all that stuff. And this is another interesting side of the equation. Sandboxes have been associated largely with playing with data as opposed to playing with processes and workflows within the enterprise ecosystem. Because especially if you get to larger organizations, those workflows are very complex and there are lots of handoffs from one system to the next until it hits the consumer, for example, or the partner or whatever it is. So again, to have that all inside of that environment, really it prevents any number of problems from causing you trouble down the line, right?
Right. It's code, processes, workflows, and data, kind of all, and environment, like all in one. So I think that's where the innovation on our sandboxing process has been.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And again, it allows for agility. And I think that's probably one of the main sticking points these days for enterprise investment. Where are we going to invest our money? And the other side is how to leverage AI. Lots of organizations are scratching their heads trying to figure out how to do this. There's a tremendous amount of productivity gains in personal use for people in your organization for playing around and learning things in research, but actually fusing AI to deterministic workflows, that has not really seen too much progress yet. And I think that Everest is probably pretty well positioned there because, again, you've built the sandbox inside of this environment that is already connected to your other enterprise processes, right?
Yeah, I think you're hitting on kind of one of the core themes right now in terms of, you know, how do you scale AI to at an enterprise level, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's again, you could use AI in so many different ways, and you could have AI do almost anything for you, but how do you scale that at an enterprise level? How do you make sure that you're able to provide some guardrails and some frameworks so that your broader organization can leverage AI, but kind of do things in a more consistent way, so you have some sort of control over what's going on across your entire organization. One of the CIOs we talked to said, yeah, code generation is great, but from a CIO perspective, it's a nightmare because I'm responsible for all the code that's generated within the organization, and
Right.
everybody's generating code. I'm responsible for more and more and more code, and again, we already talked about the cost of maintenance. It's like 80% of the cost is not in the generation, it's in the maintenance. So that's unsustainable for a CIO. So I think that's where we are. I think a lot of organizations are right now in the midst of trying to figure out how do you scale AI. A lot of people are trying to figure that out for themselves. We offer kind of one approach. We have an opinionated approach to do that. But yeah, I think a lot of people are trying to figure that out.